Hi everyone, I'm Sloan from SloanBella.com and I'm back with another channeled celebrity musician and ingenious businessman video. Now this man stepped in front of my last video as I was turning the camera on to record and started with the drums sitting on his chest and the stance almost like very theatrical and banging those drums with his hair flipping back, singing what he used to sing in his nightclubs on his TV show with his wife, Babalu. And I'm talking about Desi Arnez, or Ricky Ricardo on the I Love Lucy show, who patterned the sitcom after their real-life marriage and his real-life work as a musician, also an actor. Also, the creator of the current sitcom that we see on camera these days, the 3-camera method, the sitcom, the way it's created, so stepping away from the game show model and into a sitcom, a beginning, a middle, and an end, a story of a character's life. So, and the live audience. Anyway, Babalu stepped in front of my last video, so he's now going. I did the last video and I waited, but I was dying to do this and he wanted me to focus on him. But first, before I do that, I wanted to start with a story, a personal story, because sometimes I have them and sometimes I will say them. So I'm going to say this one. Anyway, as a kid, we were in Florida for the winter. As probably a lot of you know, I'm from Toronto. It snows a lot, so our family spent a lot of winters in Florida. And I was walking through the mall in Florida. I was 6 or 7 with my dad. My parents were in the mall. I was not just walking through the mall. And this is when the parents could like drop you on the TV set part of the mall where all the TVs were playing a show and they would go off and do their shopping. This is before, you know, probably kids getting snatched out of the mall was popular. But anyway, I walked up to this huge room full of all these different size TVs in black and white, and I noticed that they all had the same person on them, and I was mesmerized by his charisma. I was just a little kid, and I literally pointed at the TV to my dad who was walking up behind me and went, "Who is that?" And he explained the story of who Desi Arnez was in the show, and I knew nothing about it. And I was just so taken aback by the way that he stood, the way that he played the drums, the music, the Cubanness of his nature. I consider myself a fellow Cuban in temperament. Ended up living in Miami for a few years in my late teens, early 20s. So the whole Cuban vibe was something I was digging as a kid, but I was mesmerized, and it's the way that he translated through the camera. That's what you call star quality or charisma. It's a certain appeal that you see when you're looking at it through a camera lens, or in this case, a TV screen. He translated all the way through and basically knocked me on my butt. I was like forever a fan after that point. And then he just stepped in front of me doing the same thing I saw him doing when I was a little kid. So that was quite interesting. Desi Arnez was born in Santiago, Cuba on March 2nd, 1917. Incidentally, the same year my dad was born. So thus my daddy issues begin. Anyhow, moving forward, he was born, and of course he's a Pisces, March 2nd, right? He's a Pisces sun. But I noticed as he got over, I believe he passed away sometime in 1986. I want to say December, but I'm not clear on that. But about 1986, as he aged, I was really able to, what I believe, read his face and see the rising sign. I don't know why I never looked his chart up. I really didn't, that I can recall, but I did look it up today before I filmed the video because I like to start with the astrology. And I looked up his rising sign, and I always thought he looked like a Cancer rising, but I confirmed it today, at least with the information on the internet. Some says it's a good interpretation of the correct information, others say not. But he really did look to me like he had Cancer qualities on his ascendant. Just the shape of his nose and the shape of his face. His eyes are watery. He is a Pisces, so Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio, they really all kind of blend with the look through the eyes. What I noticed today when I was doing the videos, because the last video I did, now I'm going to interlope on his video, was a double water sign, and he's a double water sign. So no, he's a triple water sign. I digress. He is a Pisces sun with a double Cancer, Cancer rising and Cancer moon. Okay, so that is fascinating. Now, here's his chart was amazing. He had like eight 8 trines, several of them to his ascendant, one of them being Venus, making him very attractive. Even if he wasn't, quote, attractive, the presentation of the soul was attractive. So you were always going to find him attractive. This is probably a problem for his wives when they married him, because he would have been found attractive with everybody around him. So what I found even more fascinating was that he had Pluto in Cancer, retrograde in the 12th house, combust the ascendant. They were seconds apart. It would have been in the first, it was 2 degrees and something like 20 seconds. And then his ascendant is 2 degrees Cancer and like 57 seconds. So the Pluto was hiding in the 12th house, really playing on the most recent past life, but it was on his ascendant. So he would not let go of anything for any reason whatsoever. If you got an argument with this guy, I don't even have to know that. I know from that Pluto on the ascendant, he would annihilate you and not let go of what you did. Whatever it is you did, you were going to hear about it for the rest of your freaking life, the rest of your life. With that double Cancer, the ascendant and the moon, it would have given him a photographic memory. Remember, Cancer will not let go of anything it runs into in its entire life. It doesn't matter. If it sees a piece of paper with bird droppings on it, it's going to remember that. That's just the beauty of the sign of Cancer. And with Pluto on that ascendant, he remembered every little thing that was ever presented in front of him. Photographic, picture memory. Could have been like whatever Mary Lou Henner has, where she can remember dates and times and words and places, and it's almost an irregularity. He would have been like that, like with that kind of photographic memory. I forget what they call it, but whatever that is, he might have had that. I didn't read any of that, didn't hear about that, but looking at his chart, I would say that that was probably true. He also had in his first house, oh my God, if this guy didn't reincarnate right back in after the most recent past life, where his life would have been ended due to cultural and family circumstances. So what does his soul do? It says, you know what? I'm going to work this out and I'm going to come back in Cuba in the middle of the Cuban Revolution so that I can get killed again. That's what he did. I was like, holy shit, because it's so fascinating. First house Saturn in Cancer conjunct the south node, okay, and the moon, and then conjuncting the second house cusp with Neptune in the second house. Oh my God. Political, religious, and family ideation differently, okay? Saturn killed by family, distrust of family, retrograde. This life came right back in to redo it in a different way, okay? Not trusting of family, not trusting. And look at how he grew up. Saturn in the first house almost always ends the most recent past life through their own hands. So he may have gone to fight in a war because the family said, this is what you do, we all did it, or the family was executed because of their beliefs. Does it sound Cuban? Is it sounding Cuban? Is it sounding Russian? Is it North Korean? No, it's sounding Cuban back in the day, right? Cuban still is under a lot of, even though it's been opened up, Cuban spent a lot of time in that kind of culture where if you didn't agree, you were killed. So he came from that, was born into it again, and then Saturn conjunct the second house cusp. Saturn conjunct the second house cusp is fascinating because you are either freaking filthy rich or you are poor as shit, okay? So it's poverty or it's so rich that more money than God kind of rich. He did both. He was born into a family established. So he came from both parents having positions in society, well-established hierarchy. I believe his dad was a politician, and of course, they got run out of Cuba. So this is another lifetime where he's getting chased out of his country because of his family, and they lose all their wealth and power and position, and he has to come to America. I believe they arrived in Miami. As I said, I lived in Miami in my early 20s and I loved it. My Cuban nature was alive and well in Miami. My temperament, English speaking Canadian version of it, but nonetheless, Cuban in fiery nature. But they moved there, and so the family lost its status all over the place. Like they went from having money and position and status to basically being refugees or immigrants or whatever with no money, power, and status because they came to a new culture. And this is when Desi went out and started to do his music. But here's what's so interesting, because he keeps impressing upon me, no matter what he did and no matter what he said and no matter what accomplishments he made, and there were many, vastly accomplished in this life. However, underneath, what he shows me is dollar bills and he shows me gambling chips. This man liked to gamble with everything that he did. He kind of leads me down the path of everything he did that was successful was gambling on something that he never thought he could do, but forced himself to do because it was the thrill of the gamble, throwing the dice, throwing the chips, putting the chips, betting, gambling. This is what he did. So when he accomplished what he took risk at doing, he let it go. This is why he let a lot of shit go. He's like, I accomplished it, now I'm gonna fuck it up because I wanna go out and play gambling again. It was an addiction in a weird way to accomplishing money, success, women, all of this, okay? All of these things. Now, he goes right back to assuring me that his reputation is very overblown, okay? His reputation for visiting, which he has no problem with visiting like prostitutes and that kind of thing. This was taught to him by other family members, by the way, but it's very overblown, except if you were married to him, then it was probably true. This is what he says. He gets like there's a kick out of his marriage to Lucille Ball. There's a real kick out of that marriage. It was never the same after they ended, and he didn't realize that. Now, in his defense, she was an aggressive person to him. She had expectations. Of course, she's a Leo. I believe she had a Capricorn moon. I didn't even look her chart up for this video. I think she had a Capricorn moon, which means it would have sat on his North Node. However, what I'm saying is she was strong-willed and he was strong-willed. And he could always, he's showing me, he could always use his charm and his charisma to kind of break her down. She fell for it every time, hook, line, and sinker. He had kind of, I'll use the word demons, but I don't mean it like traditionally the way I mean it. He had thoughts that went over in his head. It was in the ability of climbing to achieve what it was that he wanted to, throwing the net out there and trying to like hang on to it and climb up the rock wall so that he could see if he could play poker with the big boys. He loved to do that, but once he did that, he got bored and he wanted to go back again to where he had just left. So he wanted to go back. He felt better just kind of on his own, not necessarily in Hollywood, but on his home. The whole Hollywood game for him took the fun out of it for him. And he took the fun out of his marriage. He's acknowledging that probably they shouldn't have gotten married. He's thinking he shouldn't have gotten married, but it was the thing to do is what he's thinking. He enjoyed his second marriage, but it was not the same kind of gambling and risk. He liked the energy of the risk. That's what he liked. He liked the energy of the risk. When I look around at the energy of family and children, he loved his family, but he was also very disconnected. There was a very disconnected element to him. Uranus and Venus in the 8th house. I don't want commitment. I don't want rings on my finger. I marry them and I fuck them. So he drew a line down the middle. This is my wife and these are my women I do shit with. I don't want to do with my wife, and I take the risk over here because that excites me as well. So I like to do that. So what I am, in fact, is a bit of an addict and a bit of a selfish person because I'm going to do what I benefit from all the time. Okay, I'm not supposed to say that, but that's what it is. He's kind of sitting, now this is hilarious. I'm gonna tell you the image I get right off to the right side of myself. He's sitting back, he's kind of wearing like lighter colored, I would say director's pants, but they're not. They're from the time frame that he was in, probably from the late 50s to late 50s is what I'm feeling. He's shaking his head yes with that. He's sitting in his chair, his arms on the chair, and he's smoking a cigarette looking at me as I'm talking about him. He comes through really clearly. I can see an impression on this side, which is funny. He's been dead for a while, 86, so like 35 years. He misses the old school style of stuff that he did, and he tried to keep things along. And there is some gratitude to his ex-wife, which was Lucille Ball. There's a lot of gratitude about how she helped him later on in life. I don't know what that means. I'm assuming it's when he was married to his second wife. Not a day went by that he didn't look for her attention, approval, advice, something along these lines from her. He needed her in that capacity. That's something he regrets. He wasn't prepared due to his own childhood. He was kind of a pawn in his own parents' marriage. He liked his dad, but his mother was a firecracker. So apparently he married another firecracker. He liked his dad. He had, good connection to his father, but it was also a disconnected connection to his father. Father, very similar in nature. Mother, like totally fun and totally like a risk-taking gambler in her own way, as per females of the time frame. She didn't really let stuff get down on her, and she enjoyed everything. I think they might have been very good friends. He's shaking his head yes. So him and his mother were good friends. His dad, I feel like his dad taught him a lot, but also taught him the ways of business. He had very distinct political beliefs. He had very distinct knowing how to deal with people in certain areas, and he came through a lot of obstacles. He talks about the way it made him feel when people singled him out for being Hispanic and Cuban. Of course, there was a lot of that in the news, and there was a lot of, fighting between America and Cuba. So he was one of them, but yet his music, he talks about his music. He really loved his music. That was extremely important to him over anything that he did, even over creating his business production company, over creating the technique in which he filmed the I Love Lucy show, all of his business work, nothing compared to the way the music made him feel. And the fun he loved. He loved to kind of like sit around, not necessarily be ultra functioning per se, just like hang out, talk, gab. And I keep getting gambling. I haven't heard of him being a gambler, but he's showing me the risks that he's taking in his life everywhere around his life. So I'm seeing the risk. So he is a gambler at life, and he had to put all the chips on black or red, and then either win or lose and start over again. That's how he operated. So he liked to be in the chase of the goal, the chase of the goal, the chase of the woman. The reason that he had so much sex, but it's overblown, I'm confused. Anyway, the reason that he cheated so much is he needed to fill a void in himself, because even though people highly respected him, he was highly sought after, respected, intellectual, smart, multifaceted. I mean, not just an actor, but a businessman, production, music, all of it, okay? Mastering different ways of thinking from two different countries at a point in our history that was just volatile. So all of those things that he was able to do, okay, all of those things that he was able to do, nothing made him feel like the chase and the music. He kind of longed for those days where he could dream about where he could go. He was in such a hurry to get where he was going, and he got where he was going, but it wasn't where he wanted to be. And it's almost like he became a family man. He liked the family man, but he didn't like the family man. His kids were 100% karmic. His chart shows no other way. All of our kids are karmic, yes, but literally these are kids he pulled in from the most recent past life, people in his family that also had their circumstances ended in that life the same way he did. He had to pull them right through. Lucille Ball, she was also one of them. So see, the ethnicity of them, her white, them Hispanic, and the kids a mix, didn't matter one bit, because it all came from that prior life. And so he knew immediately when he saw her that she was for him. He never let on. He was insecure that way, very insecure. There's a heightened, there's an artistic insecurity, gotta fuck it up kind of attitude with him. It's that kind of a nature. So when he saw Lucille Ball, he was like, that is for me. I know it. So then he just had to get in her good graces. She put up a wall, kind of, in a way. There was some skepticism with working with him, or working with somebody that she was in love with, and she was in love with him. So it was a true relationship from the beginning, and yes, he fucked it up is what he's saying. He's the one that blames himself. Although I will say this, he hid his true nature behind the scenes. And that could be cultural, where the men, you know, Cuban men, they go off and they do their whatever they're doing, and then they go home to their wives and they have Christmas dinner with their wives and they talk to the kids and they show up. I think his father was like that, quite frankly. And yet he really got along with his mother. So he was able to see both sides of what he did. Now, when I look at the energy around him, he kind of shakes his head. He was so weary, tired. He used the word weary, actually. Tired of the business. By the time he got out of it, he was just like, I have had enough. They controlled every aspect of his life, and he had a lot of power. He watched a lot of things go down, a lot of things. And looking back on it, he's kind of like, yeah, it was a real like roller coaster ride for him, up and down and everywhere. It was just everywhere. When he crossed over, now this is interesting, his lifeline was Lucille Ball. His lifeline was his ex-wife, even though he was married to somebody else, and even though he went on, his lifeline was his ex-wife. He talks about the difference in creative women, the women with the intellect, like he married his wife. He talks about the difference with her and the women that he frequented quite a bit. Detachment was what he needed. He felt that, now he's really saying this, he felt that if he could walk the line between just physically connecting with a woman, but not like engaging, although he did have fun. He was quite a party guy. He liked to laugh and drink and smoke, and I keep getting gamble, cards, something. He liked to do this. And then with Lucy, he liked to intellectually do things. She challenged him tremendously. She challenged him. Her intellect was on par, and she challenged him. So they kind of butted heads like this. I don't think she liked the fact that he didn't, she was very strong, and she expected if she upheld her end of the bargain, you should uphold yours. That's kind of what I'm getting from it. It's interesting. They did butt heads, but he genuinely loved her, and she genuinely loved him. He genuinely loved his kids. He wasn't always the best father. There's a lot of stuff he was permissive with, so he kind of went against Lucille Ball. He kind of did. He kind of played that game that a lot of men play, where the kid goes to the dad and says, my mom won't let me do this. And the dad's like, well, you can do this, and here's 20 bucks. That bullshit that men play when they're in a partnership with somebody, he kind of did that. He's saying, yeah, I did that. And a lot of what he did, he can recognize was not beneficial, but a lot of what he did was beneficial. And he's talking about, now it's interesting because when he crossed over, there was a woman, I feel like it was his great-grandmother, truthfully. She had really long, dark hair, and probably not at the time she died, but very long, dark hair, almost like you could sit on the back of her hair. Very, very long, dark hair, not modern hair, maybe time-dated back hair. That's why I'm thinking his great-grandmother, somewhere in the 1800s, and maybe even farther back on that. And I feel like she was wild. There was some kind of a mix in the family, which I've never heard about, but this is from this woman, and she's the one that crossed him over. He had a lot of influence from the women around him, the women in his life. Women were paramount to his development on a soul level. And when she crossed him over, there was a sense of relief, and how he's showing me his death. He was scared to die, and he had conversations with his ex-wife, his current wife, you know, and everybody. He talked to everybody in his head, the people that were alive, dead, everybody. As he was getting ready to die, he had an awareness to it, and it was very hard for him to let go of his physical life. It happened quickly, but he speaks about letting go of it. He was tired of it, and I just jumped with my breath, so it took him out in like a second. He crossed over pretty quick. I think he suffered in the end, but he crossed out pretty quick. That's, my breath just went like this. It's like 1 minute I'm here and 1 minute I'm there. And when he crossed over, he was at the feet of this woman. Like, it's like he was over there. And he tells me, now I'm seeing the tears of cleansing and the tears around him. He was cleansed, and he's showing me this in a spiritual sense. He had let go of his religious thinking or his spiritual thinking, whatever it was that he believed in. It wasn't so much around him, but he was spiritually cleansed as he crossed out of this life into that life. It was a relief for him and a release for him, okay? It was such a relief and a release. He had a really good sense of humor, but he was extremely hard on himself. And if you asked me, he didn't think much of himself. He did so much and he just didn't think much of himself. So there was a self-esteem was an issue for him very much. A lot of what he did was out of this fear. But see, Saturn in the first house in Cancer, freaking retrograde, oh my God, with the moon and the South Node, that is remembering your past life, dying because you stuck up for yourself and stood in your strength, okay? Stood in your power. Remembering that, standing in your power, remembering that is, can you just, I mean, his insecurity came from Saturn in Cancer retrograde in the first house, conjuncting the moon, conjuncting the South Node. And I can almost see it like a doorway opened. He died, he came back through, and the same feelings were very, very prevalent on the surface of his emotional nature. He felt responsible, not good enough, like he couldn't. This is how he died in the past life. So he comes into this one with those feelings permeating all over him and a sensitivity to everything around him. I mean, Pisces is going to love to drink, but double Cancer into Pisces, hello alcoholism. Just say alcoholism. That's it. And then you got like a quirky Venus in Aquarius, and you've got a conjuncting Uranus. No, we don't want any attachment, because if I attach to you, you're gonna die. That's what that's the undercurrent of it. But when he crossed over, he was truly cleansed in a spiritual way. So this is not an issue for him. He learned so much. He's showing me that when he crossed over, he went and educated himself in ways that he had not been able to due to the Cuban Revolution or whatever it was at that time that he was born, whatever happened in his home country. He's showing me that he educated himself. He educated himself in so many different ways, and he is showing me this. He's the first one to show me this. Well, other people have suggested it, but he's showing me that he went back through many lifetimes with him. So he went into the Akashic or Archaic records, however you pronounce it. I'll pronounce everything upside down. He went into them and he started to look through his past lives in order to clear them up. So there was a reckoning. So what he's showing me happened is that when he died from this life, it completely ended a karmic cycle for him where he stepped forward and he went over, let's just say, the last 50 past lives, and he started to clear them out of his subconscious on a soul level. It's hard to explain energetically, so that when he's ready to come through again, he's ready to come through with this cleared. That is kind of interesting. And again, this is kind of fascinating as well. I'm going to do another video because I have one to do on his great granddaughter who wasn't really recognized by the family as far as I can tell. And she just passed away at the very young age, I think in her 30s, and she had cancer. So I want to do a video on that, but I'm deliberately not being shown that right now so that I can come back and do a second video, which I'm going to do a second video. But for right now, this is my first video on Babalu, Desi Arnez. I can't stop saying Babalu. Maybe Babalu bugged him because he keeps coming through with it and then he starts banging on those drums. The drums that were strapped around his neck, maybe they have a different name for them. The percussion instruments that he has around his neck. There's like 3 of them and he's just boom, boom, boom. And he's just, it's great. Anyway, he still loves that version of himself. That's the version he's happy with. I think that that's where we're going. He also points out that he was kind of an animal lover, actually. That's a weird thing to say. I don't know where that came from, but he has a definite connection to animals. And in particular, it is interesting because the relationship between him and his daughter and him and his son were entirely different. Him and his son, he saw his son through his eyes, through his own behaviors, and he recognized things through his son, through his eyes, through his own behaviors. So that was interesting. That his son was a teacher to him. So was his daughter, but I'm talking in the way of a man to another man kind of thing. Anyway, I'm ending this video on Desi Arnez, and I will be back with video number 2. And once again, my name is Sloan from SloanBella.com.